Hey everyone, get started with this journal page today, shall we? I am starting on some watercolor paper, and today we're going to be using some Lindy's Stamp Gang Magicals, and I'm making sure that my water is thoroughly saturated because this powder is water reactive. And so you can see now I've opened it up, and I just set it down next to my work area, and I am using the back end of a brush to kind of sprinkle this powder around. And you don't need a lot of it. A little bit goes a very long way. It's actually similar to the formula of the stuff that makes your mists kind of spray pretty, and I'm sure it has some mica mix into it and a few other things. And here you can see it start to react with the water that's already on the paper, and I do notice that I'm not quite getting the reaction that I want, so I'm just going to add a little bit more water to really help activate those magicals, that powder that I've sprinkled around. And the color really, really starts to come forth in these. That's very cool. And so we're working on creating kind of like a starry kind of sky background in this. You can tell I really do love celestial things. Do remember to put the lids back on your magicals because you don't want to get a liquid into the pot, excuse me, which is the little container, the little jar. Otherwise, it will activate the powder in your jar and then you won't be able to use it on a project later. I did have some kind of little heavily deposited areas around where the powder was a little dense. So I just dipped my brush and helped kind of move those around, used a little bit of water and picked up some of that magical that had started to pile up there. And like I said, these are called Magicals by Lindy's Stamp Gang, and they really are little pots of delicious fairy dust. I don't even know what to call it. It's very, very cool. And now I'm just heat setting everything, and it is important to remember that they are water reactive, and so you should set them with something. You can spray them or put a crystal gloss over them or a workable fixative, something like that. Otherwise, as you continue to work on top of them, anytime you put down something that's a little bit wet, then it'll pick back up. All right. And the great thing about watercolor paper is it has a lot of oomph to it. It really stands up really well. So you can kind of bend it back into place if it seems to be curling on you. A few other things I've got here are some dictionary pages and old book pages cut into circles just with some dies. I've got some of my favorite black permanent pens. There are a few microns there. I have a Zig pen that I really like. That's the silver one. The microns are kind of the tan colored pen. And then I have a Pitt brush. I have a bunch of Pitt pens by Faber-Castell as well. Now the pen that I picked up to use is a micron one, or I'm sorry, excuse me, it's a Zig pen, and I like it because it's kind of the thickest point that I have it without going into a chisel. And at this point, I have drawn some hills on my background, and it's just kind of going to be like a grounding area where my house is. And you saw those on the pile. We have some Unlaw Studio chipboard houses that we use on this project, the House Mash, Tiny Houses Mash. And so that's what I'm working on now, is just a place to place my houses so that they're not just floating on the page, but they're also not all the way down to an edge. So I'm just giving a place to ground them. And I'm using my pen and a ruler just to draw some lines, and I'm trying to keep them all going the same angle, but I'm not caring about the width. I'm just kind of having fun making it a little bit whimsical. And now I'm going back in and I'm coloring every other line black. And I'm switching back and forth between pens because I'm using a thinner pen around the edges, and I'll try to use a thicker pen in the middle so that I'm not spending so much time coloring, and I'm also not wasting like a really fine pen covering these big areas when I could just use something like a brush or a wider chisel. And you can kind of see just going back and forth and working through them and making sure that they're good. And also you can see there I've pulled out the brush, and as long as I move quick enough with the brush, then I actually don't even have to use a thin one to outline with, like a thin felt tip. I can just kind of go quick with my brush. But that did take a couple practices there, and some of them got a little wonky at the bottom. But I'm really enjoying how they're not standard, and it's not like everyone's half an inch or everyone's a quarter of an inch. They're kind of back and forth, back and forth. There we go, almost done there. And I do go back in. Now this one is a Sharpie, and it's really important to remember that different pens are going to have different blacknesses to them. And I talk about this a lot because it's important, and it's important to me. But some blacks are blue based and some are red based, and that just means that one of them is going to be a little bit warmer, the red based one, and one of them is going to be a little bit cooler, the blue based one. And I used that brush, that Pitt brush pen, and it seemed to have a little bit of a lighter blackness to it, because then when I go back in and cover up some kind of like funny little spotted areas with this Sharpie, they're a little bit warmer black, and you can actually see them on top of the project, on top of the other black. So it's pretty interesting that black is not black and white is not white. Now I'm working on just kind of placing in, I have this idea to work in some trees, and I'd really like to kind of have like a little bit of a forested area for my houses that I'll be adding in later. And so I've got these, they're just book pages, and they've been die cut using circle die cuts, and some of them I just layer up to kind of cut out the center as well, and then I'm cutting 2 circles at once, and it's actually really nice. I'm also using the Tim Holtz Distress ink. This is walnut stain. It's a really nice rich color, just like beautiful walnut wood is. And I'm using an applicator. It's a little tiny little foam applicator that goes on the end of your finger. And I'm just applying some ink to the edges to distress these and kind of age these circles, which are actually going to become my tree top. So it's going to become the leaves and the branches in my tree. And I'm just making sure I'm getting everyone, and I'm not being super careful because I'm going to spray them with water to really activate that ink. And then here, about halfway through, I decide I really want some ink on there rather than being even a little bit of careful I was being. So then I just go directly from the ink pad to the project, to the piece of paper, and then it's a really, really like heavy, rich colored ink. But the sponge creates kind of like a little feathered, kind of more like gradient distressing, like antique old paper color. And so it's really great to pair the two together. And you can see there, I wasn't super careful, but I did just spray them with water, and I didn't drench them. I just kind of sprinkled the water on them, and it starts to create this kind of very like water droplet effect that I enjoy immensely, and I use this technique a lot, a lot. And of course, heat set everything. And these, the ink on these is similar to the Magicals as far as water reactive goes. So I can't keep piling a bunch of water on these without sealing them. Or not just water, but like wet media and things like that as well. Right now you can see me, I'm just placing my treetops, and I'm kind of playing with it and going back and forth, and certainly that is always an option that you'll have. There, I've got my Crystal Clear Coat Out by Krylon now. You can use Crystal Clear, you can use Fixative, you can use matte, you can use whatever you like. But all I've done is spray it. So I didn't show you that part because I have a spray booth. It's important to remember that you can't spray in a non-ventilated area, okay? It's very bad for you if you breathe those chemicals in often enough, or even just a few times, you can cause damage to your lungs, okay? So I sprayed in a spray booth, just so you know, away, go outside, spray into a box, something, okay? Now I'm using a matte medium, which is very similar to gel medium. It's just a bit more fluid. I'm using that to apply my trees, my tree toppers, I should say. And this way I can not only secure them down, but I can brush quickly over the top, not too much, otherwise that ink will start to run, but I can brush over the top, and then it's kind of like this little envelope of medium that is covering both underneath and on top of the paper I'm trying to glue down. And it's just a really, really very secure way to adhere thinner materials like thin papers and things like that to a project. And now I'm going back in between my lines, and this is kind of some doodly fun, and I definitely urge you to do this, to practice this, even if you're not doing it on a page, or maybe you just have a journal where you just scribble. Doodling is really good for the soul. It really helps you get things out, and you can, oh, and I always tell my students, you can always cut a triangle with a die, or cut a square with a die, or sometimes even circles, but if you spend more time doing handwork, then you're really going to see, eventually you'll see your style come forth, your style is going to start to emerge. And also, if you're having a really bad day, you might do like long, skinny, kind of harsh triangles. And if you're having more of a relaxed day, you might do like wider, kind of fat, chunky, little happy triangles. I mean, it's really a great way, especially if you have a hard time expressing your feelings too. And you know, art journaling, of course, and I always say this, but art journaling can be a million different things. It can be a place where you practice techniques, or where you learn new skills, or where you do this, or where you do that. But down to it comes down to art journaling. So you're journaling with art, and then you might need to release some feelings, or you might want to record them, or maybe you don't care right now, but if you spend more time doing handmade things, and then in the future, you come back and you're looking through your journal and you're like, oh, those pen strokes were really hard that day. I was having a hard week. It could be really great for you. It could be insightful, and I don't know, do more handmade things, okay? Anyways, back to, so I was saying I was doodling between those lines. I did some lines between the lines, and then some dots, and I just went back and forth. And you've got some up close shots of those at the beginning of the video, but now I've gone back in and I'm doodling around the treetops, and this is fun too. Now at first I was trying really hard to be really specific about it, but I kept going off and I kept going off because I used that gel medium, and it really helped blend the paper into the background rather than just stick the paper on top nice and chunky. So as I was trying to outline everything, my pen kept going over the edge, or one way, or over the edge the other way, and excuse me, I ended up with a bunch of ugly little lines where I didn't think I want them. But in the end, it really gave me the opportunity to just be more creative, and you'll see that in a minute too. But now I am adding some branches and trunks to my trees here, and it's still a work of art, but it doesn't have to be the Mona Lisa or the Sistine Chapel, and that's what I always try to tell my students in person. So I definitely want to say that in the video too, like, don't be too hard on yourself. Look at these trunks. Do these look realistic to you? Certainly not. Just go for it, okay? Just do it. Do more handmade things. Do more doodling. Don't be so stuck on if it's perfect or realistic or anything like that. Just go for it. These are certainly not realistic. You know, my drawing teacher is gonna wonder what the heck I'm up to, but it's fine. Just go for it. Here is where I was talking about that opportunity. I was trying to make those perfect outlines and they just weren't working. And then I just thought, just like I just told you, just go for it. And I told myself, if I'm going to tell them to go for it, then I have to go for it too. And so I thought, get one of your big bold pens and just start scribbling these circles in place. Go, go, go. Go around them, go around them, go around them. And I love it. I'm so excited with the way it turned out. I kind of just kept going and going and going, and they've got these big, great, kind of sketchy borders around them, and they are super delicious. And you've got an up close shot of that too, so you can either go back to the page or visit my blog, or you can see at the beginning of this video too, and I'll pop them back in the end of the video too, so you can see them there, the close-up shots. I love that tree. It kind of has like a chunky little belly or something there in the middle. It's so adorable. Okay, now I'm pulling out my Unwild Studio chipboard houses, and I'm going to play around with them a little bit. But this tiny house mash is really great from Unwild Studio. It's got a couple different shapes of houses in there, and then I think you either get 2 or 4 of every one. And so there's like small chunky ones and tall skinny ones. Some have doors cut out, some have windows cut out, some have heart cutouts. And then we try to dump as many of that stuff back in there as well. So if you wanted to layer windows or hearts, etc. And then some are just solid. So those ones, of course, would be really great to paint or emboss or stamp on or anything like that. But then as I'm going through this, I tell myself, don't forget to journal. Basically, that's what it comes down to. And I do want to work on using my journaling more for whatever's going on in my life or in my head or what's happening. And basically on this page, that boils down to, I want a house on a hill away from the city. Now, I don't want to be in the country or completely away from the city, but sometimes I need a little quiet and not so many kids outside. So I ended up making a little village on a different hill to the right side, a village that is a community, and they have whatever, I don't even know what's there, right? Places to eat and stores to shop at and a library and all of that stuff. But then far on the left hand side is my little house with my little heart coming out of the chimney, and I'm using a 2-way glue to put these down. And what that means is you can use it when it's dry. If you leave it on something to dry and then put the 2 pieces together, it's tacky and repositionable. But if you use it while it's still wet and you put the 2 pieces together, then it's permanent. Okay. I'm also stamping a little Viva Las Vegas stamp here. It's 3 little swallows. They're super stinking adorable, and I kind of just like enjoy tucking them into little projects here and there. And I was worried about making sure that they're facing the right way, as you can see, so I stamped them about 1,000,000 times before I stamped them on my project. And there they are. Great. And now the rest of the video is kind of just going to be going over a lot of things we've done in the past, like some mark making and using Polska paint markers. So I really kind of sped it up through this last bit. It's about 4 times speed, but right now I'm using like a navy marker. It's not quite navy, but it's a little bit royal blue, and so it's really great contrast to the kind of blue-green that I have in the background from the Lindy's Magicals. And I'm just stamping them not stamping, but marking with them in kind of little splotchy areas, and I really enjoy it. I really enjoy using the paint markers this way. After I make sure that the blue is dry, then I go back in with some white and kind of highlight on top just to bring in a little bit more contrast. And the blue was a little stark. It was a good contrast, but it maybe was a little bit too contrasty. So this white kind of helps dial it back a little bit. And just heating between layers because it's important, you know. If things are wet when you put them down, then they are going to mix. But a lot of products, like acrylic-based products and spray paints, etc., if they're dry, if you do one layer, dry it, and then do another layer, then the new layer is going to show up better because it's going to hold its own and it doesn't have anything to mix with. For example, like an orange on top of a yellow, they won't mix if the yellow was dry first or the orange was dry first. I did just go back in with one of my permanent pens, and I also did a little bit more doodling. And in that area, I kind of do some funny little sketchy circles and just some dots all over to really bleed out those dots I made with the Posca marker. And then I'm also using my thicker Zig pen. This is that permanent silver one I talked about before. It kind of has a thicker nib on it. I was using that to draw a few scallops here and there on my trees. And now I am outlining my houses with a much finer point. And this is one of my Pitt pens because I have them in the biggest variety of tips. And so I have like a brush, a couple brushes, a small brush and a big brush. I have a small chisel and a large chisel. And then I have all my different felt tip nibs, which are like 0.5, 1, and they go on. They're all different sizes. Anyways, I have outlined first the houses with just lines that match the outside, but then I also hand wrote along the edge. And my handwriting just said, I dream of a house on a hill with like wainscoting and a window seat and just some things that I'm really hoping for eventually in my future. I did just use a fine liner to splatter some dots, and then you also saw where I used a little bit of paint and water and a paintbrush. And this was just to get a little more splattery effect on those kind of areas I had already talked about with the Posca marker and such. And it depends on what you're using, but different paintbrushes will give you different size splatters, and some will give them really fine misty ones, and some will give you like big chunky boom, all splatters. And the fine liner is really nice too because I know what size splatters that will give me. Now I've got out this kind of like orangish glow color of paint, and I'm using a comb brush. And all kinds of brushes have different tips too, but a comb brush is specifically missing some of the bristles at the end to make it more like a comb that you would comb your hair with. And it's really great for doing like dry brushing, and basically what I'm doing here, where I start with a lot of color and then I want it to gradiate out. So I just start with the color at the end and then drag my brush out, and the paint disperses a lot quicker than it would in a different kind of paintbrush. And that's it. So that's my page from there. And I don't know if I'm going to title it or not. I haven't really decided yet. It's actually still just like you see it there. I'm very happy with it, with my little house on the hill. And I can't wait to see what you do. Thanks so much for joining us. Don't forget to join me in the Facebook group and share your projects based on my lesson. Okay? Thank you so much. Bye.